My wife cheated on me with our neighbor, then secretly forged my signature to sell our family home for $350, $0. Now she's suing me for half of the proceeds after claiming I abandoned her during our divorce. I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this, but here I am. It all started with what seemed like a normal day, but within hours, everything I thought I knew about my wife, Jessica, was shattered. The most unexpected thing. I caught her in bed with our neighbor, Steve. Yeah, the guy next door who always seemed a little too interested in her, but I never really paid much attention. Turns out they'd been sneaking around for months. It wasn't just a one-time thing. They'd been doing it right under my nose, and I had no idea. The moment I found out, my world flipped upside down. Jessica had always been the queen of drama, but she also knew how to hide her tracks. She was bitchy, manipulative, and a master at lying. Still, I thought I knew her. I thought I knew us. We had been together for 10 years, and for most of that, I believed we were solid. We had a nice house, good jobs, 2 kids, everything seemed perfect on the surface. But lately, I'd noticed she was distant, checking her phone all the time, making excuses not to go out with me or the family. She was colder, more dismissive, and I kept telling myself she was just stressed, working too hard, or maybe just bored. Then came the day I found her phone open on the kitchen table and I saw the message. It was from Steve. Nothing explicit, just a simple, "Can't wait to see you tonight," sent at 9:45 p.m. I froze. My stomach sank. I looked around to see if maybe I was imagining things, but no. Her phone was right there and she was in the other room pretending to be on a conference call. I felt my blood boiling, but I kept calm, waiting for her to come back. When she did, I casually asked about the message. Her face froze for a moment, then she started lying. "It's just work stuff," she said, dismissing it with that bitchy smirk she always uses when she's trying to manipulate me. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I started digging. I checked her social media, her texts, her emails, everything. It wasn't long before I found proof, photos, messages, receipts from their secret meetings. They'd been sneaking out late at night, going to hotels, even exchanging explicit photos. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face for so long? And worse, how could she betray me like that after everything we built? I confronted her that night. I told her I knew about Steve, about the affair, and about the lies. Her reaction. She called me paranoid, accused me of spying on her, and then started crying fake tears, claiming she was just stressed, that Steve was just a friend, and that I was overreacting. She even had the nerve to say I was imagining things, that I was insecure. That was the moment I realized I was dealing with someone who only cared about herself, who would lie and cheat without a second thought, and who didn't respect what we had. The thing that hit me hardest wasn't just the betrayal. It was the way she lied so effortlessly, like she thought she could just manipulate her way out of it. I felt humiliated, angry, and hurt all at once. How could she do this to me, to our family? And that's when I started to think about what I needed to do next. Because if she was willing to cheat and lie, what else was she capable of? I knew I had to find out everything about her secrets, her lies, and the money she was hiding to cover her tracks. That's when I started to realize there was more to this than just an affair. It wasn't just infidelity. She'd been planning her escape, and I was the last one to see it coming. I didn't want to believe it, but the signs were everywhere. She'd been acting strange with the bank accounts, making secret calls, and I even noticed she was trying to forge my signature to sell our house. That's when the full scope of her deception hit me. The betrayal ran deeper than I ever thought possible. I had no idea where to start, but I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to protect myself, my kids, and what was left of our life. The pain of it all was overwhelming, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't going to be a pushover. I was going to fight for what was mine, for the truth, and for my dignity. That's when I decided I'd get to the bottom of her lies, no matter what it took. After that night of confrontation, I knew I couldn't just sit around and let her keep twisting everything in her favor. Jessica was good at lying, but I was determined to find out how deep her deception went. I started digging into everything: bank accounts, emails, her phone. I needed proof, solid proof, that she was not just cheating but also actively trying to steal from me. The first thing I did was check our joint bank account. It was a mess. She'd been funneling money into some secret account. When I traced it back, I found a transfer of $50, $0 just days before I discovered her affair. That was a huge red flag. I felt my stomach tighten. Why would she need so much money, and where was she getting it? I also noticed that she'd been making payments on a new car, something I never knew about, and she'd been secretly paying a lawyer. That was when I realized she was preparing for something bigger, a clean break, probably to run away or hide assets. One night I caught her trying to forge my signature on some documents. I was going through her purse, just randomly checking, when I found a copy of a fake signature she'd made on a deed. Turns out she had been planning to sell our house, our family home, without telling me. The house that I had worked so hard for, that we had raised our kids in. That was the moment I snapped. I wasn't just betrayed emotionally, I was being robbed blind. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. How could she do this? How could she lie about everything, including the place we called home? The next step was to get legal advice. I wasn't about to let her sell the house behind my back. I contacted a lawyer, and that's when I learned she'd already signed her part of the paperwork, forged my signature, and was planning to finalize the sale for $350, $0. She was trying to cut me out completely. My head was spinning. I couldn't believe she was capable of this level of deception. She had lied so much, I wasn't sure what was real anymore. Meanwhile, she kept up her act, crying, claiming I was abandoning her during the divorce, saying I just walked away and left her with nothing. She was spinning stories, trying to manipulate everyone, including the courts. She claimed I was a bad husband, that I'd been emotionally absent, which was a complete lie. I'd always been there, working hard, providing for her and the kids. But she wanted to paint me as the villain so she could get half the proceeds from the house and whatever else she could squeeze out of me. I started to see her true colors. She was bitchy, manipulative, and utterly ruthless. She'd lie in a heartbeat if it suited her. And now she was trying to turn the tables, claiming I'd abandoned her when I was just trying to find out the truth. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for a while. The money she'd been hiding, the forged signatures, she was covering her tracks, trying to make sure she'd get everything she wanted. I couldn't believe how far she'd gone. It was like I was living in some twisted soap opera. All the signs were there, but I'd been so blind. I kept asking myself how I missed all of it. How did I not see her slipping away? How did she manage to lie so convincingly? I felt betrayed, angry, and almost numb. But at the same time, I knew I had to act fast before she managed to sell the house or hide even more money. I started to gather everything: copies of the forged signatures, bank statements, emails, texts. I wanted to build a case. I knew she was trying to manipulate the situation, but I had enough evidence now to fight back. I was not going to let her get away with this. I was going to make sure she paid for her lies and betrayal. I even hired a private investigator to follow her for a few days, just to see if she was sneaking around or meeting Steve again. Turns out she was. She was still seeing him, even after I found out everything. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut repeatedly. Every time I uncovered another lie, another secret, it was like a fresh wound. I was angry at her, yes, but also sad. Sad that the woman I loved and trusted had become someone I didn't recognize. I wondered how I could rebuild my life after this, or if I even wanted to. The only thing I knew for certain was that I wasn't going down without a fight. I was going to expose her, protect my rights, and make her face the consequences of her actions. And so, I prepared myself for the storm. I knew that whatever came next, it would change everything. I was no longer just a betrayed husband. I was a man fighting to save what little I had left of my dignity and my family. I had to be smart, patient, and relentless. Because if I didn't, she'd walk all over me, and I refused to let that happen. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Jessica wasn't just a wife who cheated once and called it quits. No, she was a master manipulator, a liar, and someone willing to burn everything down just to get what she wanted. I started to realize that her entire story about being abandoned, the one she was spinning to the courts, was pure fiction. She claimed I'd walked out on her during the divorce, leaving her destitute and alone. But the truth was, she had been planning her escape for months, maybe longer. She forged my signature on the house sale, secretly transferred money, and even tried to hide her affair with Steve by lying about everything. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. All those nights I'd come home exhausted, thinking she was just stressed or tired. Meanwhile, she was sneaking around, screwing our neighbor and plotting to take everything from me. It was like waking up from a nightmare. I started to see her in a different light. She'd been wearing a mask of innocence while secretly tearing apart our life. I decided I needed a plan. I couldn't just confront her again and hope she'd tell the truth. No, I had to be strategic. I contacted my lawyer and explained everything I'd found. We decided to file an injunction to stop the house sale, and I also started gathering evidence to prove she'd forged my signature and lied about the divorce. I knew I had to act fast because she was pushing ahead with the sale and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. One day I went to the house to pick up some things and I saw her with Steve in the backyard. They were laughing, holding hands. My stomach dropped. She looked at me like I was invisible, like I didn't exist. That moment hit me hard. I realized she'd moved on and I was just a pawn in her game. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she betray me, cheat on me, then try to take everything I worked for? It was like I was living in some twisted nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I started to think about the money. The $350, $0 she was planning to get from selling the house. I knew I had to fight her on that. I contacted a forensic accountant to trace every dollar she'd moved, every transaction she'd made. Turns out she'd been secretly funneling money into her own accounts, buying jewelry, designer clothes, and even paying off some of her credit cards. The woman was a snake, and she'd been hiding her tracks well. But I had enough evidence now, and I was ready to use it. Meanwhile, she kept denying everything, claiming I was the one who had abandoned her. She insisted she was just trying to protect her rights, that she'd been nothing but loyal. That was the biggest lie of all. She was the one sneaking around with Steve, forging my signature and planning to leave me with nothing. I felt sick hearing her spin her tales, but I knew the truth was on my side. I had the evidence, and I was determined to show everyone what kind of person she really was. That's when I learned she'd already filed a lawsuit claiming I abandoned her during the divorce, trying to get half of the proceeds from the sale of the house. That was her way of punishing me, by making it look like I was the bad guy. But I wasn't going to let her win. I had the proof of her affair, the forged signatures, the secret transfers. I had everything I needed to fight back in court. I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief. Anger that she'd gone this far, and relief that I finally had a chance to set things straight. In the days that followed, I stayed calm. I knew I had to be smart. I hired a private investigator to get more dirt on Steve and Jessica, just in case she tried to spin even more lies. I also started documenting every interaction, every lie she told the court. I knew she was counting on her charm and bitchy attitude to win her case, but I wasn't going down that easy. I was ready to expose her for the fraud she was. It was a Every day brought a new revelation, a new lie uncovered, or a new document proving her deception. I felt exhausted but also empowered. I was finally taking control of the situation. I knew this wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about standing up for myself, for my integrity, and for my kids. I didn't want them to grow up thinking betrayal and lying were okay. Whatever the outcome, I was determined to do what was right. The truth had to come out, and I was going to make sure it did. At this point, I knew I had to escalate my actions. Jessica's lies had gone too far, and her attempt to claim I abandoned her during the divorce was just another manipulation. I sat down with my lawyer and laid out everything I'd uncovered: her affair with Steve, the forged signatures, the secret money transfers, and her recent lawsuit claiming I was the bad guy. We agreed I needed to take legal action to stop her from selling the house and to protect my rights. The first step was filing an emergency injunction. I didn't want her to be able to close the sale of the house until all the evidence could be reviewed. I also had to prove that she'd forged my signature on the deed, which was a serious criminal offense. My lawyer advised me to gather as much evidence as possible: texts, emails, bank statements, witness statements if I could find any. I started to compile everything meticulously, knowing that the court would need irrefutable proof. Meanwhile, Jessica kept up her act of victimhood. She was crying to friends, claiming I'd abandoned her, that I was a terrible husband who had left her with nothing. She painted herself as the innocent victim in all this, even though I had concrete evidence of her. Betrayal. She was bitchy, lying, and manipulative, trying to spin her way out of the mess she'd created. I couldn't stand her lying anymore. Every day I felt more disgusted, more betrayed. One night I decided to confront her again, thinking I could get her to admit everything. I called her out on her affair, the forged signatures, and her secret money stash. She snapped at me, calling me paranoid and accusing me of trying to ruin her. She said I was just jealous, that Steve was just a friend, and that I was overreacting. Her tone was bitchy, dismissive, like I was just some inconvenience she had to deal with. It made me realize how little she cared about the truth or about us. All she cared about was saving herself and getting her hands on that money. I also started digging into her finances more deeply. I hired a forensic accountant to trace her transactions. What I found was shocking. She'd been funneling money into a separate account, buying herself luxury items, and even paying off some of her credit cards with the stolen funds. She was spending lavishly, all while pretending to be the victim. I felt sick thinking about how much she'd lied and manipulated to get what she wanted. Then came the bombshell. I discovered she had already signed the paperwork to sell the house, using a forged signature of mine. The sale was scheduled for just a few days later, for $350, $0. She was planning to walk away with the money, leaving me with nothing. I immediately contacted my lawyer, who told me I had enough evidence to challenge the sale and stop it. I felt a surge of adrenaline and anger. How dare she try to pull this off behind my back? How could she be so dishonest? The next few days were chaos. I had to prepare for court hearings, gather witnesses, and make sure the judge saw the truth. I even brought in a handwriting expert to testify about the forged signatures. Meanwhile, Jessica was still pretending to be the innocent victim, claiming I'd abandoned her and that she was entitled to half of everything. But I had proof of her affair, her secret transfers, and the forged documents. I knew I was about to expose her for the manipulative person she truly was. Throughout all this, I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and frustration. I kept asking myself how I got here. How did I go from a happy marriage to fighting for my life and my assets? I was furious at Jessica for lying and cheating, but I also felt heartbreak for the woman I once loved. I wondered if I had missed the signs or if I had been blind because I wanted to believe in us. But now I saw clearly. She was a bitchy, selfish woman who only cared about herself, and I was done being her victim. The court date finally arrived. I was nervous but prepared. I presented my evidence: the emails, bank statements, forged signatures, and witness testimonies. Jessica tried to deny everything, but her lies fell flat when the handwriting expert confirmed the signatures were fake. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. I knew I had a good chance of winning. I just hoped justice would be served and that she wouldn't get away with stealing my home and our money. I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting for my dignity and my future. The court hearing was a whirlwind. Jessica arrived looking bitchy, as ever, trying to wear that fake innocent face, but I could see right through her. Her lawyer was doing her best to spin her lies, claiming I'd abandoned her, that I was a neglectful husband who left her on her own during the divorce. She even went as far as to say I had no right to challenge the sale because I'd walked out and left her with nothing. It was pure bullshit, but I knew she was trying to manipulate the court, just like she'd lied about everything else. When it was my turn, I laid out the evidence piece by piece. I presented the forged signatures, the bank statements showing the secret transfers, the texts from Steve, and the proof of her affair. I called in experts, the handwriting analyst, the forensic accountant, to testify. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, scrutinizing every document. Jessica kept trying to interrupt, throwing in her bitchy comments, but I stayed calm. I knew I had the truth on my side. The moment the handwriting expert confirmed the signatures on the deed were fake, Jessica's face lost some of its color. She tried to deny it, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge looked at her, then back at me, and I could see the wheels turning. The court was about to see who was lying and who was telling the truth. Meanwhile, I also brought up her secret bank accounts and the transfer of $50, $0 just before I found her in bed with Steve. The judge seemed surprised at how calculated her actions were. I argued that she was actively trying to defraud me out of my share of the house and the money we'd built together. I pointed out that her claim of abandonment was just a desperate attempt to cover her tracks. Jessica's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim, claiming I'd been neglectful and that she was just trying to protect her rights. But the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was too clear, and the witnesses I called confirmed her pattern of deception. I felt a surge of relief knowing I was finally exposing her for who she really was. The judge took a break after hearing all the evidence. When she came back, she announced her decision. She granted the injunction to stop the sale of the house and ordered Jessica to produce all the relevant documents, including the original signatures. The judge also agreed that Jessica had committed fraud by forging my signature and transferring funds without my consent. The ruling was a huge win for me, but I knew this wasn't over yet. Jessica was furious, throwing a tantrum in court, but I felt a strange sense of victory. I'd proven her lies and I was finally getting some justice. After the court session, I felt drained but also relieved. I realized that I'd been fighting not just for the house or the money, but for my dignity. Jessica's betrayal had cut deep, but I was determined to hold her accountable. I knew she'd try to fight back, maybe even try to manipulate the system further, but I was ready. I had the evidence, and I was prepared to see this through to the end. In the days that followed, I worked closely with my lawyer to prepare for the next phase, filing for a full divorce, reclaiming my rights, and making sure Jessica couldn't steal from me or my kids anymore. I also started to distance myself emotionally from her, realizing that I'd been holding onto a version of our marriage that no longer existed. The Jessica I knew was gone, replaced by someone who only cared about herself and her schemes. It hurt, yes, it still hurts, but I also feel a strange sense of liberation. I learned a lot through this mess, about trust, betrayal, and the importance of standing up for yourself. I know I'll never forget what she did, but I also know I'll be okay. I've got to rebuild now, piece by piece, and make sure she doesn't get away with destroying everything we once had. I've learned that sometimes the only way to fight back is with the truth, and I was finally ready to stand in it. In the aftermath of everything, I've come to realize how much this whole ordeal changed me. Jessica's betrayal, her lies, her sneaky attempts to steal not just my house but my dignity, those things cut deep. But stepping into the courtroom and exposing her for who she truly was, that felt like a victory I desperately needed. It wasn't just about the money or the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my life from her deception. Since then, I've filed for divorce officially. The process has been rough, lots of legal battles, emotional exhaustion, and trying to piece together what's left of my sanity. But I've also learned to stand firm. I know now how dangerous it is to ignore red flags, how manipulative someone can be when they're only out for themselves. Jessica taught me that trust has to be earned, and I'll never let myself be so blind again. The kids are adjusting, though it's hard. They're young, and I try to shield them from the worst of it, but they see the tension. I make sure to tell them I love them unconditionally, that Dad is here and that they're safe. I want to be the father they deserve, strong, honest, and resilient. I owe that much to them, especially after all the chaos Jessica brought into our lives. As for Jessica, I know she's not done trying to manipulate the situation. She's still fighting in court, trying to argue that I abandoned her, that I'm the reason everything fell apart. But I've learned to see through her lies. I have enough evidence now to prove her fraud, her affair, and her attempts to cheat me out of what's rightfully mine. I don't intend to let her get away with this time. Looking back, I realize I was naive to think I knew her. I was naive to believe that love and trust could withstand betrayal like this. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can stand up, fight back, and come out the other side. I've become more cautious, more aware of the signs of manipulation and deceit. I know I need to protect myself, my future, and my kids from people like her. This experience has left a scar, sure, but it's also given me clarity. I don't regret standing up for myself, even if it hurt like hell. I'd rather face the pain now than live in a lie. I've come to accept that sometimes the truth is the only thing that can set you free, and I'm finally free from her grip. So here's my advice to anyone who might be going through something similar. Trust your instincts. Don't ignore the red flags. Document everything. And never underestimate how manipulative a person can be when they're trying to cover their tracks. Fight for yourself, fight for your rights, and don't be afraid to expose the lies. The truth might be painful, but it's always worth it. Because in the end, honesty is the only way to truly move forward.